Hi, this is Michael Rubin. So we've been talking about playing in minor or playing in major, and how a major chord has a major third and a minor chord has a minor third. And we've been talking about how the idea of playing diatonically means using notes in the melody that are in one scale, and that all the notes in the chords will also be in one scale. Let's look at a C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. What are the blow notes on a C harmonica? C, E, G. In the C major scale, if C is the first note and D is the second note, what numbers are C, E, G? 1, 3, 5. Well, another way to think about it is that we kind of played leapfrog. We started on the C note, the name of the chord, then we skipped over the D note, we leapfrogged to E, and then we leapfrogged over F to G. So we got C, E, G by skipping notes. The important note is the E note, the third. In the key of C major, there is an E note. So when you have a chord C, E, G, that's a C major chord. If the chord were C, E flat, G, a half step lower than the third note in the chord, that would be a minor chord. So let's start on the second note in the scale, D, and play leapfrog. We're going to skip over E and play F, and skip over G and play A. The notes in this chord, the 2 chord, are D, F, and A. Now the question is this a major chord or a minor chord? Well, the important note is the middle note, the F note. If you look at the D major scale, the third note is F sharp. So we don't have an F sharp in this chord, we have an F. F is a half step lower than F sharp, or a flat third. Therefore, this D chord, D, F, A, that is diatonic to the C major scale, where all the notes are in the C major scale, is a D minor chord. So that means if you're going to be diatonic to the C major scale and you play a D chord, it has to be a D minor chord. If you were to play D, F sharp, A, the F sharp would not be in the C major scale. And so when you play it, it would become a chromatic song, using notes that are not in only one scale. So to stay diatonic, the D has to be minor. Now D is the second note in the C major scale, so it can be called the 2 chord. What this means is, if you want to remain diatonic to a major scale, and you want to use a 2 chord, the 2 chord would always be minor. And it doesn't matter what key you're in. If you're in the key of G, the 2 chord is A. 1, 2, G, A. If you're going to play using the G major scale and remain diatonic to it, that A chord is going to be an A minor chord, because 2 chords are always minor in music that is diatonic to a major scale. Let's look at the third chord in the key of C major. We're going to start on the E note, the third note in the scale, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3. And we're going to skip over the F and get to G. And we're going to skip over the A and get to B. So the notes in this chord are E, G, B. So the important note that will tell us whether or not this is a major chord or a minor chord is the middle note, the G note. We have to compare that G note to the third note from the E major scale. The E major scale is E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. What is the third note? G sharp. But we're not playing a G sharp in the C major scale. It's a G note. That G note is a half step lower than the G sharp. Therefore, the E chord is going to be minor. And since E is the third note in the C major scale, that means if you want to play using any major scale and be diatonic to it, the 3 chord is always minor. Let's look at the 4 chord, F. We're going to skip over the G and get A, and skip over the B and get C. So the 4 chord is F, A, C. The important note is the middle note, A. We're going to look at the F major scale and compare the 3rd note in the F major scale to the middle note of this chord, what's called the 3rd. The F major scale is F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. What's the 3rd note? A. Is that the middle note of this chord? Yes, it is. Therefore, since the middle note of the F chord is the same note as the 3rd note in the F major scale, that F chord is a major chord. And what that means, since F is the 4th note in the C major scale, is that 4 chords are always major. Okay, so that means, I just took a quick break, so hopefully I'm where I thought I was. That means the 4 chord, whenever you're playing diatonically to a major scale, is always major. Let's look at the 5 chord, the G chord. If we play leapfrog, we get G, B, D. In the G major scale, the 3rd note is B, the same as the middle note in our new chord. Therefore, the 5 chord is always a major chord. Let's look at the 6 chord. A, skip a note, C, skip a note, E. In the A major scale, the 3rd note is C sharp. So the C in our A chord is a half step lower than the 3rd note from the A major scale. Therefore, 6 chords are always minor. Now the 7th chord gets tricky, and you wouldn't have known this if I didn't tell you. The 7th chord would be B, D, F. Well, in a B major scale, the notes are B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B. So this is a little different than all the other chords we've looked at. In all the other chords, the 1st and the 5th note of the major scale are the same as what we call the 1st and the 5th note in the chord, which is really the 1st and the 3rd note in the chord. But the middle note is either the same as the major scale, meaning the chord is major, or a half step lower than the note from the major scale, meaning the chord is minor. In this situation, the D in the B chord is a half step lower than the D sharp, the 3rd note of the B major scale. So you would think this would be a minor chord, but it gets weirder. The 3rd note in the chord, known as the 5th, is F. In the B major scale, there is no F, there is an F sharp. That's a half step lower. So what we get is the 1st note from the B major scale, the flat 3rd, and the flat 5th. They call that diminished. So if you were to play a 7 chord and remain diatonic, the 7 chord would be diminished. So what you have always, if you're going to play diatonic to a major scale, is the 1, 4, and 5 are major, which is probably why people love 1, 4, and 5 chords so much. The 2, 3, and 6 are minor, and the 7 is diminished. And that's the same for any time you're going to be diatonic to a major scale in any key. Okay? So, this is how most people write a major song, is they take a major 1 chord, 4 and 5 chord, a minor 2, 3, and 6, and every now and then a diminished 7 chord. That's unusual. And they mix those chords up in a way that sounds nice to them, and then they put lyrics and vocals on top of it with a melody, and that's how they make a song in a major key. So, next time we're going to look at the Dorian scale and understand what's diatonic to a Dorian scale. Because the question is that the question we've been working on is how, if the Dorian scale is a minor scale, what chords does it work best with? Because you can play a lot of different minor scales, and a lot of it depends on what chords are diatonic to the Dorian scale. So we're going to look at that next time. Okay, see you soon.